Starbucks is closing hundreds of locations around the United States. That's not news, right? But what is news is that you can actually turn their failure into your success. I'm gonna show you why they're failing, I'm gonna show you what's hurting them, and I'm gonna show you how to take that and apply it to your business to make your business successful. If that doesn't make sense, then I highly recommend that you pay attention. So everyone knows the story about Starbucks. That's not news, but in case you're in the dark, Howard Schultz started Starbucks by going into an Italian coffee shop in Italy and having a really amazing experience. Now, one thing he really did like was the coffee itself, the unique coffee with the foams and the espresso machines he really liked over traditional black drip coffee. But one thing he really loved about it was the experience, the ambiance it created. It was welcoming. He wanted to stay there. He wanted to experience it longer. It made him want to stay, order more drinks, order more food. And he knew right then and there that this was something that we could take to the United States and make it highly successful, because no other coffee shop was doing that. It was very basic. It would have some really basic pastries and some really basic breakfast products and then a couple of black drip coffees, and that was about it. So that's what Howard Schultz based Starbucks off of. He based it off of an experience. The way Starbucks became so successful is because they became innovators. They were innovators in everything they did. They innovated the way you got your drinks in the morning, what drinks you would be able to get. They innovated the names on the cups. They were one of the first people to actually do that at a scalable level. They innovated the way that a coffee shop looked. It wanted to feel like luxury and feel like you wanted to stay there, feel warm and welcoming. They innovated Wi-Fi. They're one of the first ones to do free Wi-Fi in every single location. That was not the norm before that. And they innovated their hospitality. They wanted to have hospitality through and through. Now, Howard Schultz was a very smart business person because he understood that hospitality was the way to win them back. We'll create the ambiance, but we really have to create that warmth and experience. And the only way we're gonna bring that alive is with the staff themselves. And so they focused heavily on their staff. Now, he understood if the staff wants to give hospitality, they have to give the staff hospitality. So he had a really good program for employees, and it was always a goal to focus and take care of their employees at Starbucks, whether it was through benefits, whether it was through perks, whether it was through education alone. And that's one thing, is that you can get a really good leadership education through Starbucks. You can start off as a barista, move up to a manager, and learn a lot about business just by going through their leadership development program. And that's what they're really robust on too, training and systems. So you take innovation, you take training, you take systems, and you take really good ideas, and you'll get a successful business. And that's what Starbucks did. And they really invested in growing fast and growing big. Now there's a big worry that Starbucks would take over all coffee shops. People were thinking there's just gonna be Starbucks. It's the only place you can get coffee, because the competitors won't be able to compete with the robust products, with the hospitality, with the environment. They had all this money and they had all this firepower and they had all these ideas, and no one else was able to compete with them. But eventually what that did was innovation breeds innovation. So because they became so innovative, because they demanded that the hospitality scene be something way more special, way bigger than just the average coffee shop that we were given at the time, especially in the United States, they breeded really high-end coffee shops. People who really cared about beans, people who really cared about the brew, who really cared about being a barista, who really cared about pastries and food and experience. And everyone's saying, okay, now we see Starbucks model, which is getting a little bit stale. We can elevate it with something new. We can make better coffee than they can. We can give better hospitality than they can. We can give a better environment than they can. And so independent coffee shops started sprouting up all over the United States, and there was a huge rush. It seems like there was a new sexy coffee shop opening up with a new concept, new ideas, and it was awesome, right? But the problem is that Starbucks is suffering because Starbucks has become stagnant. Starbucks is an innovator. They went from innovation of hospitality, elevated experience, and then they innovated into convenience, right? How do we make this convenient for people? They'll get the product, they'll be convenient, they use the app, they use obviously store locations, they use approachable products. Now, when they did that, when they switched over to convenience, they took their eye off the prize when they stopped focusing on their employees. People are complaining more and more about working at Starbucks and how difficult it is, how unhappy they are working there. And then on top of that, we have issues with stagnant product. They haven't really innovated a product recently. They haven't innovated the spaces. They are redoing a lot of their locations, but they've stopped, right? There's just not that innovation anymore. They're not the leading edge of coffee. They're not coming up with those new ideas. That's a problem, right? Because at one point their products were really successful for them because they're coming up with these new products and seasonal and designs that people were seeking, and they're making a lot of money off of that. That's died down. And then they came up with the idea of the app and getting discounts and specials and stuff like that. But now that's died down because other people are doing it. Then they had innovation of products like the pumpkin spice latte, which had its own life form at one point. Now that's died down. So their innovation is starting to cease, right? They took in their off the price, and now they have identity crisis because they're no longer innovative. They're no longer the most convenient or the only convenient spot in town. And they're no longer the people who take the best care of their employees, and they don't take the best care of their guests, right? Now it's kind of widely known that Starbucks has bad hospitality, right? You very rarely get someone who has good hospitality. For example, I went to a Starbucks the other day and I asked for an extra side of sriracha packet, and the girl looks at me and just turns around, walks away, hands it to me, doesn't even look at me. I said, "Thank you very much." And then she looked away, just walked away. "No, you're welcome." No eye contact, no nothing. Just I was wildly inconveniencing her for asking her for an extra side of sriracha. That never happened at Starbucks. They're so friendly, but that's what comes with identity crisis and with, growth. And so now they're kind of in a funky spot, right? Where they don't know what to do. They're trying to figure out their footing, and they're losing money, they're losing venues. Now, let's be honest, Starbucks is not failing by any means, right? They're probably closing locations because they're just not the profitable locations. They have so many locations, they're gonna open wrong locations in wrong spots, and they're gonna learn that. They're gonna have an efficiency phase where they go in and they close the stores that they need to close to open stores that they need to open. But what can we learn from Starbucks at this point, right? Now Starbucks is no longer the place you want to work. Starbucks is no longer the place you want to go to. Starbucks is no longer the hospitality giant it was or the innovator that it was. So what can we learn? Well, we can learn what made them successful, right? And we don't need to reinvent the wheel because it's really simple. You have to be an innovator. So if you're working and you're running a business, you have to be innovative. And so what I focus on, what I always talk about is innovating experiences. We want to have the best guest experience. That's what we want to be known for. Because let's say you're a coffee shop, right? You don't want to be the cheapest and you don't want to be the best. Now, when I say you don't want to be the best, it's because it's a title you can't obtain. You can't say, "We have the best coffee in the world. We have the best coffee in town. We have the best coffee in the country." People might have that opinion. You might have really good coffee, but to have the title of the best unanimously to the public is damn near impossible to ever own because it's such an opinionated milestone. And so what we want to focus on is something that we can control that will pay off in spades, something that we can control that will build our business and our brand value, and something we can control that has a high demand in the market, right? Because a good business model, really simple, right? There's a demand in the market. You look for the big demand here in the market. I'm going to build a product, and then I'm going to sell that product to the market. Simple, right? What's the big demand right now? Hospitality. Because you can use yourself as a case study. How often do you get hospitality? When you go to a coffee shop, when you go to a restaurant, when you go to your bank, when you go to your cell phone company, when you interact with all those businesses that you're giving your money to, how often are they honest to God making you feel special, making you feel like you matter, right? Not just a number. 9 times out of 10, they're going to make you feel like you're just a number. And that is something that people crave. I want to feel valued. I want to have an experience. I want to feel like the people that I'm giving my money to care. And when I get that, I'll be undyingly loyal to them. But I need that commitment from them first. They need to earn my trust. And so we do that with hospitality training and systems. And I call it the 5 phases. It's super simple. You have to have advanced leadership, because if without leadership, you can't implement anything. You have to have high-level systems, which create structure for your business. Starbucks does systems really well. That's how they're able to scale as fast as they were, because they have systems in order to give the guest the same product every single time. Then you have to have dynamic training. Their training has to be robust, simple but robust. Then you have to have follow-up mastery, and you have to have accountability. If you can't follow up with your staff, then you're never going to be in an elevated business. And if you can't have accountability, then basically you're just requesting that your people do things versus developing them into unrelentless hospitality experts. Now, that might sound like a lot. It's not. I'm actually hosting an event, 1 hour, digital and live. You can show up online, and it's absolutely free. And I show you how to create and implement all 5 of those: advanced leadership, high-level systems, dynamic training, follow-up mastery, and accountability. And not only that, this is part of my book launch. So if you want to pre-order my book, you're more than welcome to. If not, show up for free and get all that information if you're serious about implementing these things, because it's simple, not easy, but you can absolutely do it.